things you begin to understand is that America needs the narrative of Black pathology. You know, everything would be fine if only Black folks would, right? We've heard this. And then you begin to fill in the blank. If only they would value education. If only they would not be thugs. If only they would. You fill in the blank in terms of that Black pathology, because that is absolutely necessary in the narrative of America. And so there I'm watching MSNBC, CNN, and Fox, all with the same narrative of Black pathology, this Black rage they're talking about. Well, I'm sitting up there and I'm shaking my head. You know how you're shaking your head like, And then I realized I'm looking shoulder to shoulder to shoulder to shoulder. I'm shaking my head so hard. And I said, no, this is white rage.
Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. Today we are talking about something deep, uncomfortable, and absolutely necessary. We are talking about the white rage, felony disenfranchisement, persistent inequality in education, and how this all tie into the long tangled web of systemic racism in the United States. This isn't just about the past, this is about now. When we think of racism, we always think of hate group, slurs, or perhaps police brutality. But white rage? That's different. As Carolanderson outlined in her book White Rage, it's quiet, it's policy driven, it's the backlash that is often dismissed as neutral lawmaking that rears its head every time Black Americans make gains. It's the gutting of Reconstruction. It's the Jim Crow. It's the so-called war on drugs after the civil rights history. It's voters' ID laws after Obama's election. It's the banning of divisive concept in education after Black Lives Matter shook the world. White rage doesn't ban crosses, it passes legislation.
I wanted to talk about white rage. And I know it sounds crazy, but let me talk about how a Black woman got to white rage. And although it looks like it began with Ferguson, actually it began in February 1999, when a Black man came home from a hard day's work. And he went home, got into his apartment, and realized there was no food. You know that when you come home, you worked hard, you look in the refrigerator, and the refrigerator's looking back at you. And there's that moment where he's like, oh, but he's in New York. And you know, New York, the city that never sleeps. So you know there's going to be food available. So he goes outside, he steps on his apartment, you know, the porch, and whew, a car rolls up. 4 officers of the NYPD hop out, guns drawn. 41 bullets later, Amadou Diallo goes down. 19 of those bullets hit. Amadou Diallo was unarmed. He had committed no crime. There was no warrant out for his arrest. He was just a Black man in the Bronx. Now, that is bad enough. But then I'm watching Ted Koppel's Nightline, and Mayor Rudy Giuliani is on. And Giuliani is just unrepentant. And Ted Koppel, as you know, is not a softball interviewer. And he is on Giuliani. He's like, Amadou, Amadou, Amadou. And Rudy's like, what? He barely says the man's name. What he does say, my policies are working. New York City is safer now than it has been in years. And he pulls out his little flip charts with the little graph showing crime going down. My policies are working. New York City is safer. And I'm thinking, it's not safer for Amadou. Safer for whom? And the policies that he's talking about, it's the broken windows policing policy. That broken windows policing policy basically hyper polices black and brown neighborhoods, criminalizing black people, criminalizing brown people. You jaywalk, the cops are on you. Drop some litter on the ground, cops are on you. You're standing, cops are on you. You're walking, cops are on you. You are getting ready to step off the curb, cops are on you. That hyper policing is the policy that Mayor Rudy Giuliani said was working. And while he talked about it, he said, and my police force is the most restrained and best behaved in the United States. I'm in Kafka land right now. You know, where Gregor Samsa's this big cockroach, but everybody's acting like it's normal, right? You know, because I'm thinking, most restrained and best behaved, don't fire 41 bullets at an unarmed man. I know something is wrong, but I don't know how to name it. And you know, we have to name things in order to be able to face them, to be able to deal with them. And so I don't know what to call this thing. And I'm just going, ugh. But as a scholar, I keep writing, I keep researching, I keep thinking, I keep teaching, I keep writing, I keep researching, I keep thinking. And then in August 2014, I'm in my home office and the TV is on. And I look up, and Ferguson is on fire. I mean, the flames are everywhere. And it didn't matter. I had the remote in my hand and I'm flipping the channels and it didn't matter. Let me see, my left hand. It didn't matter if I'm watching MSNBC. Yeah. CNN or Fox. Out this door. It didn't matter. And it all said the same thing. Look at black folks burning up where they live. Did you know that black people were burning up where they lived? Black folks are burning up where they live. What is wrong with black people? Burning up who burns up where they live? Because one of the things you begin to understand is that America needs the narrative of black pathology. You know, everything would be fine if only black folks would. Right? We've heard this. And then you begin to fill in the blank. If only they would value education. If only they would not be thugs. If only they would. You fill in the blank in terms of that black pathology, because that is absolutely necessary in the narrative of America. And so there I'm watching MSNBC, CNN, and Fox, all with the same narrative of black pathology, this black rage they're talking about. Well, I'm sitting up there and I'm shaking my head. You know how you're shaking your head like, And then I realized I'm looking shoulder to shoulder to shoulder to shoulder. I'm shaking my head so hard. And I said, no, this is white rage. Ooh. This is white rage. I had lived in Missouri for 13 years. I saw the way that policy worked. I saw the way that policy systematically and systemically undermined African Americans' access to their citizenship rights. But as a nation, we were so focused in on the flames that we missed the kindling. That kindling. Let's talk about some of that kindling at Ferguson. Kindling. 67% of Ferguson's population is African American. In the 2013 municipal election, the black voter turnout rate was 6%. How do you turn 67% of the population into 6% of the voters? Those are numbers from Jim Crow, Alabama. You do it via a series of policies, the ways that you hold your elections, the ways that you craft your ballots. There's a whole series of tricks that you can use to change 67% into 6. Kindling. Because you begin to think about what it means if you don't believe that you even have a say in who your representatives are. Kindling. Let's talk about the schools. Michael Brown's school system. Missouri rates its school systems. It accredits them on a 140-point scale. Graduation rates, matriculation rates, test scores, the whole 9 yards. And you can get a total of 140 points. How many points do you think Michael Brown's school system got? How many? On 140. 20. That's a good one, Eric. That's a good one. 20 out of 140, right? Anybody else? 10. Whoa. Aren't okay, I believe that's called cheating. 10. 10 out of 140 points for 15 years. What that means then is that the public policy leadership was very comfortable with pulling an entire generation of Black children through a school system that could garner no more than 10 points, an entire generation. And then start pulling another generation through, because we're at 15 points from K through 12. Kindling. Kindling. Let's talk about the police. We know that the police are here to protect and serve. Yeah, because I'm going to be doing this throughout, because there's a kind of hymn book that we sing from, right? We know, right? We know the police are here to protect and serve. So in this protect and serve, except in Ferguson, they looked at that Black population as revenue generators. So you're doing 26 and a 25, boom, ticket. I don't think you fully stopped at that stop sign. Boom, ticket. Looks like you've got a broken tail light. Boom, ticket. And this is a working class neighborhood. And so when you start hitting this neighborhood, this community, with $50 tickets, $25 tickets, $80 tickets, $100 tickets, and you begin to think about what that means. You pay the ticket or you pay your rent. You pay the ticket or you keep food on the table. You keep the lights on. There's not disposable income here. When you don't pay that ticket, the next time you're doing 26 and a 25, because now there's a warrant out for your arrest. Then you are jailed. And then the entire criminal justice process of fines and court fees and bail are all pulling from this working class Black community. By the time when Ferguson blew, those fines and those tickets accounted for 25% of Ferguson's operating budget. 25%. And let me be really clear. Justice was not blind. Justice, in fact, had, what did they call it? Had LASIKs. Because justice was, so if the police would happen to stop somebody white and try to hand them a ticket and go, ooh, sorry, not you. Or if the police officer handed somebody white a ticket and somebody white went in to go then pay the ticket, it was like, what are you doing? I'm trying to pay this ticket. And to tear up the ticket. So you're getting this massive extraction from the working class Black population in Ferguson. Kindling. And so as I began to think about this kindling, I began to think about the way that white rage worked. White rage is not about visible violence. We often think of rage as visible. We often think of the racism as this visible thing. But white rage is subtle. It is corrosive. It operates through the state legislatures, through Congress, through the judiciary, through school boards. It cloaks itself in legalities. And so I set out, man, so because it's so quiet, it's so subtle, you don't see it. And so I set out to blow graphite onto that fingerprint, to be able to trace white rage throughout time, not all the way back to time immemorial with the dinosaurs, but at least up to the Civil War all the way through to 2016. And one of the things that became clear to me as I started thinking through how white rage works, it became clear to me that the presence of Black people was not the trigger for white rage. There's that stunned, almost, what you talking about, Willis? Look. It is the presence of Black people with ambition. The presence of Black people with drive. The presence of Black people with aspirations. The presence of Black people who achieve. It's the presence of Black people who refuse to accept their subjugation. The presence of Black people who demand their rights. That's the trigger for white rage. And this society has therefore punished Black resilience and Black resolve. Now, at this point, this sounds like almost Scooby-Doo-ish, right? Because we know it's so counterintuitive, because we think of the U.S., America, as the land of opportunity, right? And so all you've got to do is work hard, yes. And I'm telling you, y'all know the hymn, right? So my baritone's here. We know the hymn. We don't even have to pull out the book. It is in the ether. It's in the cultural language that we understand how this nation works. But so what happens if you have a series of policies that in fact punish Black achievement, Black aspiration? And it sounds counterintuitive, but how else can you explain how government after government after government has worked so hard to see to it that Black children do not get a quality education? Let me give you a couple of examples. In 1947, in Prince Edward County, Virginia, the school board finally agreed to build a high school for the Black children. Because remember, this is a completely segregated system, Jim Crowed. And so in 47, that would be after the U.S. helped defeat the Nazis. I need to put that in its time frame. Then we get a high school for Black children in Prince Edward County. Within a few years, that school is bursting at the seams. 2 to 3 times as many children are in this space than that building can hold. And so the Black parents are going to the school board, the all-white school board, saying, we need an additional school. We've got kids bursting at the seam. It's doggone near impossible for them to learn sitting one on top of the other like that. We need a new building. The school board was like, no. And the parents are pushing hard, unrelenting, demanding education for their children. And the school board finally relented and put up 3 tar paper shacks and said, your kids can go there. Now, meanwhile, the white school is nice brick with indoor plumbing, which is not available in the Black high school. By this time, we're in 1951. So there was a young woman, Barbara Johns, 17. And Barbara Johns was like, my name is the wrong one. You gonna take this? You gonna take this? No, you're not taking this. You gonna take this? Yeah, you're like, no, we're going to walk on out of here, aren't we? And she starts organizing that school for a massive walkout, a massive demonstration, saying, we're not having this. We're not having it. They rose up and boom, hit the door. Administrators were like, what just happened here? And they were like, yeah, yeah. Now, she wasn't playing. And so the death threats started coming in on this 17-year-old child who was demanding quality education. It was so bad that her parents had to spirit her away to safety to Alabama. Boom, I rest my case. You know when you got to go to Alabama for safety in 1951? Woo, woo. Meanwhile, Prince Edward County becomes one of the school districts that's bundled into the Brown case. Now, when Brown came down, Prince Edward County said, oh, I got something real for you. And so what the town fathers, working with the state legislature, decided to do was to shut down the entire public school system. Because that way, if we've got to have equal schools, then black children and white children equally do not have access to a public school. And you can almost hear the "aren't I smart" written on them. Except, so black parents are like, what? But they're not listening to black parents. White parents are like, what? And they're like, oh, no, we got this. We're not going to let your white babies go uneducated. You know that. And so what they have done is that they have set up taxpayer-funded vouchers to pay for the tuition for white children to go to all white segregated private academies. So white children continue to be educated, and there is absolutely nothing for black children. Thousands upon thousands of black children. And it wasn't just in Prince Edward County. This was in areas throughout the South. And when these schools are shut down, Prince Edward County is shut down for 5 years. Begin to think about that. You're in the 5th grade. When your school opens up again, you're supposed to be in the 10th. Think about everything that you have lost in those precious 5 years. And this is at that moment where the U.S. economy is beginning to transform from a manufacturing-based economy to a technology-driven, knowledge-based economy. And we have all of these black children that the governments and the school boards have said will not be educated, period. What does this mean? Let me give you some sense of the power of white rage. So Brown won, and I see law professor Robert Shapiro here. Brown won, 1954, where separate but equal has no place in public education. Did I quote that right? Yes, okay. Brown 2, 1955. This is the implementation decision with all deliberate speed. 1956, 101 U.S. congressmen and senators dug in, signed the Southern Manifesto, vowing massive resistance to the Supreme Court decision. We will use every lever of power within our control to fight this thing. 1957. Radio signals pick up, beep, beep, beep. And you hear President Eisenhower going, dang, dang, dang. Because beep is Sputnik. The Soviets have launched a satellite into the air, into orbit, and it is a technological feat that the US did not believe that the Soviets could master. But it's more than that. The Soviets have their nuclear arsenal. But the US is thinking, yeah, but they don't know how to get over the Atlantic or the Pacific. We're good. So we'll have some forward bases for our allies in Europe and our allies in Asia, but we're good. Beep. Beep. And so the federal government does something that it hadn't done before. It pledges hundreds of millions of dollars into education to fund what they said would be the brain power to fight the Cold War. We need scientists and engineers to be able to counter, to outrun, to be able to outdo what the Soviets are mastering here. Now, this National Defense Education Act was huge, landmark, and it was being guided through Congress by two Alabamians. I think I just did spoiler alert. So their concern was, we want that money. You know, universities like the money. They like the money. And when the feds are putting up hundreds of millions of dollars to build labs and hire faculty and for postdocs, universities are like all on that. But Alabama was concerned because Alabama's not admitting black folk. Alabama has a whites-only admissions policy. And we got the law of the land saying, no, you can't do that. And so in this discussion with the Eisenhower administration, they're like, we will shepherd this bill through. We need to make sure that we do not have to abide by Brown. We need to make sure in financing the brain power for the Cold War that we get to maintain Jim Crow in our admissions policies. And the federal government said, yeah, we're cool with that. And so I'm thinking Jim Crow, nuclear annihilation. Nuclear annihilation. Nuclear annihilation. They're like, nah, son, Jim Crow. That's more important than being able to ensure that our citizens, our people, have the education that they need in this incredible, critical moment. That's white rage. Anybody see Hidden Figures? Yeah. Think about what that would mean if we had had that kind of investment then. And think about where we are now as we're trying to figure out how do we get more African Americans into STEM fields when we have systematically refused to invest in those schools even after Brown. Let me give you another example. The war on drugs. We can really have church up in here now. You know that, right? On the war on drugs, because one of the ways that white rage works is it cloaks itself in reasonableness. We have to keep our community safe. We have to protect our children. We have to ensure safety and security for our neighborhoods. And who doesn't want a safe and secure neighborhood? Who doesn't want to protect our children? It sounds reasonable. But how is it then? Because the research is really clear that we have focused the war on drugs on the population that does drugs the least when it comes to cocaine. The least. And about the same when it comes to marijuana. How is it in the war on drugs we have targeted those who do it the least. How is it that we have spent $1 trillion? That's real money. That's even beyond university money, isn't it? That's with a T. Whew. $1 trillion on the war on drugs. The war on drugs has destabilized state budgets. When you think about public education, I remember when I worked in Ohio for the Board of Regents, one of the things that we were fighting for was to try to get enough state money into higher education in order to drive the tuition down so that more and more students would be able to afford college. Instead, that money went immediately into the corrections budget. You can almost map, like in California, the dollar-to-dollar exchange coming out of the University of California budget, going into the corrections budget. And I just saw a figure that said it costs more now to incarcerate someone in California than it does to send them through Harvard. So this is not an issue of resources. This is an issue of priorities. And so you're asking yourself, now self, because that's how I talk to myself. Self, what could drive this kind of thing? Where as a nation, we're spending $1 trillion, where we would destabilize our state budgets, where we would block out access to higher education for our own folk. But then when you realize that the war on drugs really began to emerge after the civil rights movement and those incredible gains. The 1964 Civil Rights Act and the 1965 Voting Rights Act. Hard fought for. Blood all along the way. But if you have a felony conviction, which is what mass incarceration does, all of a sudden your access to the non-discrimination clauses in the Civil Rights Act, there are things you cannot do with a felony conviction. There are places you cannot live. There are student loans you cannot have access to. So you cannot go to school if you've got that felony conviction. And you want to talk about the right to vote? Ooh, let's take Florida. Okay, I hear some folks like, yeah, take it. Let's take Florida. In Florida, Florida has what they call permanent felony disfranchisement. Now, what that means, because it's not quite permanent, but after you serve your sentence and then your time out, like parole, then you have to wait 14 years from that moment to then be able to individually petition the governor asking for your voting rights back. What that means is that when you look at Florida, about 40% of Black men are not able to vote in Florida because of felony disfranchisement. 40%. Overall, for African Americans, is somewhere between 23 to 25% of voting age eligible African Americans cannot vote in Florida. Now, Florida doesn't mind counting their heads when it comes to the census in order to get the number of representatives in Congress. It's just though that those folks do not have any kind of say in who their representatives will be in a representative democracy. It reminds me of the 3/5 clause. So while I'm talking about the vote, let me just move on to that next piece.
So guys, welcome back. Let's talk about felony disenfranchisement. Over 5 million Americans, disproportionately Blacks, are barred from voting because of the criminal records. Think about that. Imagine you serve your time, but your voice is still taken away, and it's forever in some of the states. But why does this matter? Because it's a modern poll tax. It's a silent purge. It's a way to strip political power from the black community while maintaining the illusion of democracy. And guys, let's not forget, this is not an accident. This is the future of the system, not the bug. So guys, you know what? After the Civil War, when the 15th Amendment gave the black men the rights to vote, the southern states still found another way to shut them out. The felon laws aimed squarely at the black men for crimes as small as loitering. But you know what? The legacy lives on. Separate but equality was struck down in 1954. But honestly speaking, guys, let's not pretend that we are anywhere near equity in education, because public schools are still largely segregated by race and class, and thanks to the redlining, underfunding, and school district zones. The black and the brown kids are likely to attend schools with fewer resources, underpaid teachers, large class sizes, and even outdated textbooks. But meanwhile, often the whiter district flourishes. So, guys, how can we claim to believe in the American dream when the zipline code you are born into determines whether your school has basic heating, working computers, or even enough desks? Here is where things get twisted. Whenever real conversations about systemic racism begin, whether it's about reparations, police reforms, DEI initiatives, there is this reaction: white victimhood. And suddenly, guys, we hear cries of reverse racism, claims that white people are being erased, replaced, or silenced, as if equity for others means oppression for them. And guys, I'm not afraid to say this. This is the defense mechanism of white supremacy, recentering the white experience, even when the issue at hand has nothing to do with white suffering. It's not oppression to be held accountable. It's not persecution to be asked to share the power. And certainly, it's not racist to tell the truth. And guys, we are here to challenge that narrative that centers the white comfort over the black liberation. And most of all, we listen, and we listen carefully to the black voices without defensiveness. If you are white and if you are watching this video, ask yourself, are you uncomfortable because it's wrong, or are you uncomfortable because it's true? So guys, I'm sorry. I know this was heavy, but this conversation matters a lot. Listening to, we are tired of black fatigue. We are tired of white fatigue. When a white folk does something and a black folk question, the white folk always plays the victim, and then it's being labeled on a black folk negatively. This is why I brought this topic of white rage, the felony disenfranchisement, inequality in education, and even some of the hardships that the black folks in the United States have been enduring for years. There are some things that the media is trying to erase, especially some parts of the black history, but we are still here to talk about it. So guys, if you found this video helpful, kindly give it a thumbs up, and also subscribe if you are coming across the channel for the very first time. We are here to learn and grow. I'm your host, Judy. Until next time, guys, stay safe and peace.